involves a very considerable amount of investment and technological development and so on and so forth. So a lot of freedoms depend on there being facilities, groups, other people who facilitate that freedom. And that's true also in the world of religion, where, of course, you can be a believer without necessarily having any institutional structures, but that won't take you very far without the common practices, the church, the structures of belief and so on that are set up. Freedom of belief will not be worth the same as it is with those practices in place. So positive freedom is also important in the context of religion. It provides a kind of structure within which your beliefs can find a kind of channel, if you like, for their expression, which they wouldn't otherwise have. They would just exist in your mind, if you like. But I don't want to say necessarily too much about that. But there's also a third sense of freedom that we need to think about. And the third sense of freedom is what philosophers refer to as freedom from domination. And this is a subtle concept. If someone has the power of domination over you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually interfering in anything that you can do, or that you do. It just means that they have the power to do so if they want. So it could be, for example, that you have a man who owns slaves, but actually, because he has so many slaves, a lot of them are pretty much free to do as they wish. He doesn't order them about because he doesn't need to. There are many others willing to do his bidding and so on. So in what sense can we say that those slaves are free? Well, there aren't really any obstacles in the way of their doing things and so on. But nonetheless, there's an important sense in which they're not free, because the master still has the power to control ultimately what they do, even though in practice he may not be doing that. And so freedom from that kind of relationship with someone in a position of domination, if you like, is a distinct kind of freedom, different from the ones which the negative and the positive sense of freedom that I outlined. Now, one of the things about, you might wonder what the relevance of all this is, but one of the important steps we can now take to understand the second passage that I read out, which was from Romans. If you remember, that said, "You have been set free from sin and have become slaves to righteousness." Now, what does that mean? Because you might think, what's the benefit of getting freedom from one thing, like sin, if I then become a slave to another thing? But actually, there is a more subtle understanding at stake here, because one of the things about positive freedom, being, for example, a member of a group like a church, and therefore having freedom to do certain things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. One of the advantages of that is that, of course, being a member of organisations comes with duties, things you have to do. So it might be your turn to arrange the flowers, or your turn to read the lesson, and so on. And being part of a group is to accept that along with the benefits and privileges come the duties that have to be performed. And but those duties are not just things that you shouldn't think of them as just things you've got to do, like paying your tax or whatever it may be. Performing those duties is actually part of what it means to be part of the group. They are sometimes what philosophers refer to as liberating duties, which can sound like a paradox or a contradiction in terms, but actually it's not, because unless you were